Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. This is one of the most well-known and talked about Discworld books. It's a personal favorite of yours truly, and I was supposed to just reread this with my dad as he was picking it up, and I was gonna read it at a relatively similar pace to him. I finished it the same day I started it because I couldn't help myself, and I was doing the audiobook for the first time, and the audiobook was very enjoyable. I literally started it around noonish and just didn't stop until I went to sleep and was done with it. Now, it's not available on Audible or most audiobook platforms I saw, so I found the audiobook through means some would consider unnatural. But I can't officially say that I do recommend the audiobook. It's quite fun. But let's go ahead and get into this book itself. You can't really walk in fantasy circles for long without coming across the name Discworld, Terry Pratchett, and specifically Small Gods. This one is referenced constantly as not only one of the best Discworld books, but one of the best fantasy books, and it's for a very good reason. This is Pratchett coming out guns blazing with one of his most creative, insightful, funny, and just rawly enjoyable books he ever created. It is book 13, I believe, of Discworld, but you can actually start the series here. Small Gods or Guards are usually where I throw people to start Discworld, and Small Gods is the one I've had a slightly higher success rate of getting people to just immediately love what Terry Pratchett is crafting. And what exactly he crafts in Discworld is on absolute full display. Small Gods utilizes his style of absurdism and humor to excellent effect. You are following a god in the form of a turtle as it is going over and realizing things about its own existence. I don't want to spoil too much, but its followers, faith, there's so much commentary on the foundations of religion, how people interpret it and utilize it. It never really goes into the territory of mocking, in my opinion. That's one of Terry Pratchett's strongest attributes as an author. He can make very astute points about something he is commentating on, but he's never really coming across as mocking or mean. It's just a very Monty Python approach to humor that is utilized to observe. And wow, I know people who are extremely religious who like Small Gods, and I know people who are not religious at all who point to it as to here's a very good example of why I think religions can be abused angle. And I think it's just something that can be appreciated universally, because contrary to popular belief, a lot of religious people I know are actually very aware of a lot of the flaws of religion and are willing to engage with material that does critique it. So in terms of premise, that's really what you're getting ready for here, following literal godly characters and everyday people as they navigate a crazy environment, and the general themes that are unraveling around faith and self-reliance, intelligence, respect. And that was on my most recent reread, something I found very prevalent here. There's a very thick layering of respecting one another, understanding one another that I didn't pick up on the first time that is undeniably here. Cut in, because I wanted to get a bit more specific here on something that I originally thought might be a bit of a spoiler, but with it just being general theme talk, I think it's okay. But there is an arc here, a character arc, that goes through, it's a god essentially learning to become a better god through his interactions with people. And there's a combination of Pratchett's writing style and this concept and the specific characters he's created for it that blends so magnificently. It's just an absolutely excellent example of how different pieces can come together to really achieve the masterpiece level execution. And this being one of Pratchett's best work, I find this to be the ultimate example of why he is so appealing as an author. Okay, enough about base premise. Let's go ahead and get into the characters. This is fairly separate from the rest of Discworld. I believe the only character who will appear in any other books that appears here is Death, but you can actually use this book for your first time engaging with that character and you won't be too confused. It's kind of just an almost one-off. It feels to me, upon writing it, Terry just had an idea he wanted to get into, and he utilized this random book in his world to do so. But the character you're going to probably latch onto most likely is either the Small God, or God, however you look at it, Ohm, and the person he's interacting with most, Brother Brutha. This smaller god, this deity character, who was a mighty being, has been reduced to a form that many would consider not mighty. He's a turtle who's lacking a lot of his capabilities and even memory. And that's a fascinating being to follow, right? A former god left destitute almost, who finds that everyone who used to follow his faith has abandoned him. Instead, they're just kind of going through the motions and don't actually really have faith in this god anymore, hence why his power is reduced. In Discworld, gods get their power through faith, which in itself is something that I think many people can just immediately take on over into the real world, but having this specific character of following this god and understanding his really emotional response to finding out what's happened, and the skewing of his word through false texts and false, voices for him. It's really brilliant, and I would love to have long conversations with actually like very religious people about this, because it brings up a lot of the concerns I have about following ancient texts that have gone through generations and generations of translation, and honestly having people who have ulterior motives deciding what that should be done and believed in. Brother is someone who you will probably have more of an emotional response to. He is someone who is downtrodden, looked down upon, but he has an eidetic memory. He doesn't forget anything. He is very careful about what he says and thinks, though, and he wants to formulate his thoughts fully because he is so abused and put down upon. He is not physically very appealing. His voice acts as this very strong stand-in for the audience at times, kind of simplifying extremely common thoughts I believe we all have when we are struggling with our own faiths. I'm not someone who's particularly religious, but I certainly have a spiritual side to me, and I often do wonder about these things, and I found Brother to be a very nice stand-in who can just kind of take very complex ideas for the reader and put them forth in the text in a way where you're presenting questions where, yeah, we all have those questions, and he just gets to ask them to a actual god. The dynamic between these two is one of my favorite dynamics of Discworld. They are so funny, they have so much chemistry in a way, and okay, actually I want to switch over here. Talk about Terry Pratchett's prose. It's something I've forgotten to praise heavily on this channel and all my Discworld talk. The prose are simply beautiful. Terry Pratchett is one of the most talented writers in terms of his technical ability and ways he can just immerse you into the dialogue, the feel, the pacing. This book, it actually doesn't have too many events that happen, yet you aren't gonna ever get bored because you're following characters that are so charismatic, they're so interesting that just because they're talking back and forth for so long, you're gonna be just kind of flowing along. I actually find this to be a book that's extremely hard to stop reading and put down because just like, damn, it's so interesting what's happening page after page after page. I do believe this does stand up as one of the most insightful and fun, engaging fantasy books out there. It should be on every big fantasy fan's must-read list. It kind of appeals to the whole spectrum. It's got a great world, really fun humor, amazing characterization, clips right along, beautifully written. Why wouldn't you want to read that? Even if you don't like Terry Pratchett's take on things, it's good to get a glimpse into the other side. Of course, I'd love to hear from you, and you tell me what you think of Terry Pratchett's Small Gods in the comments down below, and do you agree with me that it's one of the best entry points for Discworld out there? But to all the people, after my recent top 10 fantasy series list who are wondering why Discworld is so special to me, what's the appeal, this is the one that I think will most clearly and concisely to you make you understand. This, or some of the Death books, or Guards. It's all wonderful. But of course, going to a score, Small Gods, I read this last year, but I'm gonna include it on this year's review list because I finally just got around to reviewing it, but I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. It's a must-read in my opinion. No question, no doubt. This is a staple of the fantasy genre. But anyway, all, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.